How's it going, everyone? It's Sam. Today I want to go over the 10 stages of Bitcoin buying or Bitcoin accumulation. And we're going to go through it, kind of give you my thoughts on where you want to start allocating Bitcoin or how much you should start allocating towards Bitcoin. And of course, this is going to be based on your own situation a bit. But I think these are really some important stages, like psychologically, to hitting Bitcoin goals or Bitcoin accumulation goals. And I think this can help along the journey. And it is pretty fun to think about where you could be if you start buying these amounts of Bitcoin in a few years. How much money could you make? If you don't mind, hit subscribe, turn on the bell notification underneath the video so you can see future videos just like this. And we will be talking about one of the first stages in Bitcoin accumulation, just being more than the average person on Earth, which the average person on Earth can only buy about $116 worth of Bitcoin. Now, if you want to win $116 of BEP20 USDT, I'll leave a link to my Twitter post underneath the video. I'm going to give away $116, so that way someone can go buy the average amount that anyone can have if it was evenly distributed, the Bitcoin that's left. So there's a link to this underneath the video. Go follow me on Twitter. Also, we can do things like this because we do get some affiliate sales. For example, Margex underneath the video, they allow you to start trading cryptocurrency on leverage. When you sign up, you get a deposit bonus that can be used towards fees. As you can see, we've been super bullish. So anyone that's been trading on leverage, pretty much, if you've been long, you've probably made some good money as long as you aren't like incredibly irresponsible with how leveraged you are. But if you want to start trading cryptocurrency, there is a link underneath the video to Margex. There's also a link down there to CoinW in case you want to start buying spot Bitcoin. In case you want to just start buying these amounts that we'll talk about, you can use CoinW. But Margex is great for leverage trading, and there's going to be a link underneath the video as well to HGAlgo where you can get 20% off. This is something that I created with a few other people that shows you when the market is bullish. As you can see here, it said that there's bullish momentum, and then we had a massive move up. So it can help you understand maybe when there's bullish momentum or bearish momentum in the market. Now let's go through the Bitcoin stages, and I'm calling them 10 stages. You might have a different idea for what your accumulation goals are compared to what I'm about to say, but I think these are pretty good for anyone out there. Like, these are some goals to hit when you're buying Bitcoin. And of course, everyone's situation is different. If you have a bunch of credit card debt, for example, you'd want to pay that off before investing in Bitcoin because Bitcoin can be quite volatile, and you want to make sure that you have all your ducks in a row. So that way you don't get freaked out when Bitcoin goes down a few $1,000. You don't want to invest in Bitcoin with any money you need, let's say in the next month or something like that. Like, do the normal stuff. Don't extend yourself too far when buying Bitcoin. And let's go through the stages. Where do you start? Well, I think you have to start with what we talked about just a minute ago, like the average person on Earth. How much Bitcoin can they actually have? It's only about $116, right? There are about 15 million Bitcoin out there, and this is because of the fact that some Bitcoin is lost, some is held by Satoshi, who doesn't seem like he's ever selling, and actually there's a lot less Bitcoin than 115 million left. Like, for example, there are a lot of entities that don't want to sell Bitcoin, that said that they're never going to sell, like MicroStrategy. We know that the ETFs are buying a lot, and they're probably in it more for the long term. Of course, anyone that buys one of those ETFs, like IBIT, the BlackRock ETF, can sell Bitcoin. But once it starts being put in retirement portfolios, it's less and less likely to be sold based on some positive price action. So the first step is just to get more than the average person has on Earth. Now, I guess even before this, just buy any amount of Bitcoin, like $5, $10. That's an important milestone because you know the on-ramps. You know how to set up an account to start buying Bitcoin. So that's an important first step. And then get to that $116 mark. Having 0.002 Bitcoin will put you above the average person on Earth. And again, I say there's 115 million I say that there's 15 million Bitcoin. It really isn't when you account for the people that are holding a significant amount. They're never going to sell. But if everyone was liquid that has access to their Bitcoin anymore, if they were willing to sell, there'd be about 15 million left, give or take. So This is going to be harder and harder to hit. Keep in mind this 0.002. For a lot of people, they can't invest $116. I know it sounds crazy, but there are a lot of people that can't invest that amount when you look at the global population. And it's going to get more and more expensive, and there are going to be more and more people on Earth as well. So it's going to be harder and harder to get to that 0.002 mark. Now, after you get to 0.002, this is the second stage, cover an emergency. So the reason I say 0.008 Bitcoin is a key level is because the average person in the US can't even cover a $500 emergency expense. This is kind of surprising, but it's been circulated a lot. Even 1/3 of employees earning $100,000 or more live paycheck to paycheck. So putting something away like $500, I think, is an important level because this is an emergency savings that you can keep in Bitcoin. Hopefully you never have to use it, right? It's an emergency savings, so it's not like, oh, I want to go buy movie tickets and I don't have any more in my paycheck this month. I guess I'll go sell some Bitcoin. No, this is really an emergency. So having some emergency savings in Bitcoin, I think, is useful. Now from there, the third step, 1% allocation. Now this is going to be different for everyone. So I don't know where you sit net worth wise, but I think if you get really bullish in Bitcoin or on Bitcoin, you want to allocate very heavily. Like right off the bat, people are like, okay, is $5 enough? Is $100 enough? And wherever you can start investing is great. But I think for people that are really bullish on Bitcoin, and there are going to be a lot of people that try to jump into buying Bitcoin over the next year, year and a half, a good milestone or a good way to start is by buying a 1% allocation. So if you're worth $100,000, maybe you buy $1,000. And sometimes you want to buy a lot more than that right off the get-go. But it's important for you to understand the emotions that come with buying such a volatile asset. So having a 1% allocation, I think, is a good place to start. Again, this might be well above 0.008 Bitcoin. This might be below. Let's say you're worth $10,000. Well, that would be $100 worth of Bitcoin. So it's going to depend on your own situation, but a 1% allocation, I think, is an important level. We're going to call it level 3, but it might be level 5, it might be level 7 for you, it might be level 1. But that 1% allocation is an important place to start or to get your portfolio to over time. That is a key level. Now, the next level is a 0.01 coiner. So someone that has 0.01 Bitcoin, it's obviously a key psychological level. It's just slightly above the emergency level. Now, this cover an emergency level, this Bitcoin amount might go down actually. Like if Bitcoin's at $100,000, it would only be 0.005 Bitcoin, $500 worth. But here, hitting this level is really important because it's going to be harder and harder for most people to get here, right? If, let's say, for example, we're at 200K Bitcoin, well, that's $2,000 that you have to buy. A lot of people can't buy that amount, and that is a significant amount for someone to put away. Let's say they have just a couple $100 a month that they can invest. Well, some of it probably goes to S&P 500 or maybe Tesla stock or something. So only a small fraction of that is left for Bitcoin. So it could take a while for some people to buy this 0.01 Bitcoin. Another key psychological level. Now the next one, 10x that. 0.1 Bitcoin. So 0.1 coiner. This is $6,200. Enough to buy a used car, but this is in an appreciating asset that might be worth $1 million one day. There's some bullish predictions saying $1 billion. So if we get one of those hyper bullish scenarios, you're probably not going to be able to retire on 0.1 Bitcoin. But if Bitcoin's at $1 million 10 years from now, even with inflation, this is going to be like a nice nest egg. Again, $100,000 worth of Bitcoin maybe one day. And it does mean that you're on the track where you're accumulating a good amount. Like if you get to 0.1 Bitcoin, well, you can probably get to 0.15 or 0.2. And this is just another stop along the way. So that's halfway through this 10-stage cycle. Now, the next level is the amount that an average millionaire could get, which is 0.214 Bitcoin. If we assume there are about 70 million millionaires in the world. Now, I've seen some estimates of 55 million, but that was from over a year ago. with the S&P 500 at all-time highs, with inflation going up, I think it's probably closer to 70 million. So 70 million millionaires trying to fight over 15 million Bitcoin. That means the average millionaire has to have less than 0.214. And that's, again, if it's evenly distributed, which it's not. There are billionaires that hold hundreds of thousands of coins. So yeah, the average millionaire is not going to be able to even get 0.214 Bitcoin. It is very close to that quarter coin status as well. And something that's interesting, just a few days ago when Bitcoin was around 48,000, 50,000, this was also a $10,000 amount of Bitcoin, which I think is kind of a key psychological level too. Now it's 13,300. It's becoming harder to get this 0.214 Bitcoin. But for a while, that $10,000 mark is a key psychological level too. To have 5 figures in an asset is huge for a lot of people. And it can be a little bit scary, right? If you're worth, let's say, $30,000 and you have $10,000 worth of Bitcoin, that can be scary. And I'm not saying that everyone should get here to this 0.214 level because it might overextend you. It might be too risky for you. But if you have, a couple $100,000, or if you have $1 million, maybe you want to have more than the average millionaire out there. So that's a key level as well. It's becoming harder and harder too. As we hit $100,000 Bitcoin, this is going to be out of reach for most people. $20,000. I mean, most people in the US, a family, make about $70,000, $75,000. So that's 3 months or 4 months of salary pre-tax into one asset. That would be really difficult, and most people won't get there. From there, half coiner status is probably where you have to go next. Now, half a Bitcoin, not quite as sexy as a full Bitcoin, but it is difficult to get to. Half a coin was, I don't want to say easy during the bear market. Like if you accumulated though, if you have a decent job and you are buying and buying and buying, you could probably get to half a Bitcoin. Now, as I said, it's much harder. $30,000 versus $8,000 during the bear market for a half a coin. And another key psychological level. If we get to that $1 million Bitcoin one day, well, you're probably going to be sitting pretty well because you're going to have $500,000 in Bitcoin. Then the whole coiner status, the heralded whole coiner status, 1 Bitcoin, it's the number one thing that people talk about when accumulating Bitcoin, when buying Bitcoin, is getting to a full coin, being part of that exclusive club. And there aren't many people that are there. Only about 1.64% of wallet addresses have 1 Bitcoin or more. And there are only about 862,000 wallets that have 1 to 10 Bitcoin. Overall, there's about 1 million people, or 1 million wallets that have 1 Bitcoin, which a lot of people have multiple wallets. So there's probably 600,000 people maybe in the world that hold a full Bitcoin. Now, of course, there are proxies, like you could buy MicroStrategy and maybe you have enough shares of MicroStrategy to own a full Bitcoin through MicroStrategy. But this is a very difficult level. There will probably only be 1 million people ever, 1 million or less, that hold a full Bitcoin. So this is a heralded level of Bitcoin accumulation. And then top 1%. If you can get to 2 Bitcoin, you will be around the top 1% of all addresses. This is pretty important too, because then you can take profits. Let's say you're someone that thinks of Bitcoin as an investment, not as a different kind of currency. Well, you could use 1 Bitcoin to sell and take profits, and then always hold 1 Bitcoin as well. So I know when I think about Bitcoin accumulation, 2 Bitcoin is a pretty important level from that psychology of taking profits. A lot of people, when something doubles, will take out their initial investment and then let the rest ride. And if you want to do that, well, you would need 2 Bitcoin to still be a whole coiner, and it would put you in the top 1% of Bitcoin holders. Now, the last level out there has to be hitting your goal allocation. Now, of course, we could go into, 10 Bitcoin, 100 Bitcoin, right? But that's not going to be realistic for most people. And you can see all the costs here too. I didn't explain that earlier, but the cost of hitting that level today. The next level is your goal allocation. It's going to be dependent on you, but I've seen BlackRock throw around 28% allocation. I've heard some people say no, 5 to 10%. It's going to be dependent on your own risk profile. It's going to be dependent on where you are on learning about Bitcoin. Like, I know some people that think Bitcoin's just a lot less risky than US dollars. So they put all of their stored labor, their stored value in Bitcoin. Instead of US dollars, they just think of Bitcoin as a better alternative. So they put it there. So their allocation is 100% into Bitcoin, except for maybe owning some stocks or some real estate. But all of their US dollars are in Bitcoin because they don't really have US dollars anymore. They just put all their USD into Bitcoin and then hold that instead. But maybe it's 10% allocation for you. Maybe it's 20%, 50%, maybe it's 2%. It's going to be dependent on your own situation. And honestly, it's going to fluctuate a lot. For example, if you have, let's say, 5% allocation to Bitcoin right now, and then Bitcoin goes up to 100,000, you have closer to 10% allocation. Maybe you want to trim that down. Maybe you want to hold it. I'm not sure, but make sure that you hit that goal allocation sooner rather than later, because there's not a lot of time left and it's becoming exponentially harder to get where you want to go. You can't necessarily get 5% allocation or 10% allocation without paying significant amounts now. Bitcoin has gone up 4x from the bottom, and as it continues to move up from here, it's going to be harder and harder for you to get to that level that you want to get to. Again, we're in a vicious bull run now, and things are just heating up. So you want to make sure you get there quickly. Now, let me know your thoughts on this underneath the video. As I said, there are links to MargeX and CoinW and to that Twitter post underneath, so that way you can get at least the average amount of Bitcoin for free, possibly, if you win that giveaway. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Check out the links underneath, and I'll see you in the next one.